Welcome to this week's edition of Down the Sideline. I'm joined with Chef. Opie is not with us this time. He's not feeling very good, a little bit under the weather. Had that little cold spell in Texas making everybody sick. I think that means that me and your immune system, Chef, is way better than his.
Yeah, that's for sure. But I don't go outside, so that probably helps too.
Yeah, it probably does. I don't know how he's sick. I played in that tournament all weekend, so I didn't get to see many softball games. I didn't get to see many football games, but I looked over the stats and kind of go from there. First thing we're going to kind of look at is the poll. Most everybody voted that they don't have a problem with, one-loss teams, being ahead of, undefeated teams. I'll get it right in a minute. But I think everybody in the nation's kind of hating on Florida State a little bit just because of their strength of the schedule and stuff like that. It seems like there was, 4 or 5 games that they played this year that there were a couple of plays from losing. But everybody kind of like that. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I got no problems with it whatsoever. Like everybody's saying, the strength of schedule is playing a huge factor now, but it's one of those you got to play people to be able to be good. I mean, if you it's like Marshall. What's the difference between Marshall and Florida State other than they're in a better conference? Not much. They're both undefeated. What's the problem?
No, I mean Florida State's a little better than Marshall is, but that's neither here nor there.
All right, for the poll this week, I wanted to throw us a little something out there. Marshall is still not ranked according to the committee for one reason or another. So what do y'all think? Do you think they should be within the top 10, 1 through 10, 11 through 20, 21 through 25, or not ranked? And what's your opinion on that? Make sure you go check out the poll. Links in the description. Let us know.
Going into last week's picks, Chef, you only got one right, man. What's the deal?
Yeah, I had a bad week last week. Just a little bit of a bad week.
The only one Chef got right was Florida State. Of course, we all didn't do very good. There was quite a bit of upsets. Opie got 2 right. He picked Georgia over Auburn, and then all of us got Florida State. I don't know. I almost wanted to pick Georgia because of the running game, and that I kind of figured that had a possibility of happening what happened on Saturday. I think I talked about it last week about I felt that Auburn's, defensive line was getting blown off the ball. Now, if A&M was going to run the ball like that, Georgia was going to be able to do it tenfold, and they, sure showed that. But I kind of figured the way Auburn could, score points, I figured, it'd probably be close, and then Auburn would pull it off on the end. As far as my picks, I got 2 right. I did pick Wisconsin over Nebraska. And I got the Florida State right. The other 2 I did not get right.
Yeah, I totally was wrong on that Wisconsin game. Wisconsin absolutely destroyed Nebraska.
Yeah, with what's his name getting like 400 yards of rushing that game. That's crazy.
Is it Gordon?
Gordon, yeah, I think that's what it was.
Yeah, I forgot about him, to be honest with you. And then I was doing the recording for the background footage for last week's episode, and I saw him in there, Melvin Gordon. And I was like, oh, yeah. And he tore it up, dude. Golly, he tore it up.
Yeah, setting all kinds of NCAA records. The viewer comment, Brandon we're actually going to do a couple of them this time. I like Brandon so much. He says, what about the top 5 besides the Power 5 conference? Or top 4 without the Power 5. He picked Marshall, Colorado State, Louisville, and Boise. Now, I mean, Louisville's in the ACC now. They weren't. Me and Chef totally forgot about that, too. I like those, except, man, you forgot about, I think it's Georgia Southern. And their only loss, I looked at it when he posted the comment. Their only loss is from last week. Their only loss is to a Georgia Tech and now Navy. Oh, and the NC State. So, all the other teams are all Power 5, except for Navy. But, Georgia Southern is pretty good. I think they're leading their conference, I believe. Whatever conference they're in, I'm not even sure. Sun Belt. Yeah, they're leading the Sun Belt. They're 7-0 in conference, 8-3 overall. So I like yours, except I'd probably put Georgia Southern above Colorado State, probably. But other than that, I like those. Chef, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I like Marshall, Georgia Southern. I might throw. I got to represent my MAC, the Huskies. They're 9-2 on the season. They're 6-1 in their conference. They're doing pretty good, and then maybe like a Memphis. So I'd probably swap Louisville out and put either Memphis or Northern Illinois, because they're only lost Central Michigan, which they Yeah, that's a bad loss. But they beat Northwestern, just beat Navy, and lost to an Arkansas team who they're a good team just in a rough conference, and they got their win. But other than that, they've been riding a high too. So I would put Georgia Southern in there instead of who was it?
Probably Louisville, ACC.
Yeah, at least, and then take out maybe Colorado State or Boise State and put the Huskies in. Yeah. But I thought that was an awesome comment. Made you think about it.
Yeah, I did. I liked it. I appreciate that. The other one I want to talk about is, let me see, SBGGMLP. That's a mouthful. That's what she said. He said the playoff system is going to be terrible for teams outside Power 5 conferences. Schiff will have the deal up there. You can kind of read it. I'm going to get away from reading stuff to you. But he's talking about, hard for Marshall and stuff to be ranked at all. My deal is I understand it's hard for Power 5 conferences, schools that aren't Power 5. But, Marshall doesn't play anybody, and neither do some of the other teams. I mean, like that list we just had, Marshall, Colorado State, Boise State, or Northern Illinois, and Georgia Southern. I mean, I'd like to see those teams get in there, but who would they play? I mean, could they beat the number? Could they beat the number if they had an 8-game playoff? Could they beat the number 8 ranked team in the country, which right now is Ole Miss? I don't think they could, or even UCLA or Georgia. That's number 10, and then on down the list. I've said this before. Michigan State, Kansas State, Arizona State, Auburn, Arizona, Wisconsin just put up 400 yards of rushing. I mean, are those teams going to be able to handle those? And I get that it's a little bit, I guess, biased or unfair. I mean, it is what it is. Your thoughts, Chef?
It's one of those, I said this a couple of weeks ago. To make it even for them and to also give some of the Power 5 conferences a little bit more of a challenge instead of, like, this week we have Alabama playing West Carolina. Give them one of the top of the non-Power 5 conference teams. Give them the Marshall. Give them the Northern Illinois. That way it keeps their strength of schedule somewhat decent compared to these cupcake teams, and it also helps improve some of these other quote-unquote weaker conferences and give them a fair shake. And I think that would be perfect. That would be perfect. It's not just a 1 week you have a gimme. That's what Herb Street said, was it last week when Ole Miss played Presbyterian or whoever? They were like, seriously, this team of all teams? It's like if it had been a Marshall, they might have said the same thing, but at least it's a Division I team.
Right. Well, that's all over this week. I mean, we're only going to cover 3 games, but like this week's schedule, I mean, we got Alabama playing West Carolina, we got Georgia playing Charleston Southern. What is that? Samford playing Auburn, and that's Samford, not Stanford, over in California. It's a different place. We got Clemson playing Georgia State. I mean, those games are all over the place, and I don't see why. I don't think that none of the Power 5 conferences will ever schedule the others. I think there'll be a few teams in there, like a Louisville and a Marshall. That'd be good. Some Clemson and, have Clemson play, some of those other teams. Have Clemson play, I don't know, maybe like Marshall or a team like that that's up and coming. But the only hard thing is, who thought last year that Marshall was going to be undefeated at this point? That's the kind of point that I'm making, that you don't really know.
Yeah, well, like I said a couple of weeks ago, based off the end of this season, fill in those gaps with how they rank out at the end of the season. Like the top 2 teams from the other conferences, schedule them with the Power 5 conferences. I mean, that's not going to be that hard of a deal, and it's still somewhat of an increase in their schedule for the non-Power 5, and the potential for a team like Marshall that's ranked in probably the AP poll, but not necessarily in the other one. Yeah, they're 18 in the AP poll, and they're still not ranked in the playoff rankings. I mean, it could be nice, but instead of each conference beating each other up and then nobody really getting a chance for a national championship, I think that's the only fair way to do it. But it is what it is.
Yeah, and I think the only true way to do it is if you had the winner of each conference just go to a playoff and play each other. But then if they'd done that, what in the hell would everybody talk about? Because then there's no more guesswork. There is no committees. There is no more AP poll and BCS poll or computer polls and the Harris poll and all poll this, poll that. There won't be anymore. I mean, maybe for a ranking system, but would it matter if you were going to win your conference? Who cares? Who cares if you were in the Pac-12 and you were ranked number 10? If you won the Pac-12, then you get to go to the playoffs regardless. Who cares what your rank is?
Yeah. So you're saying just to have all the divisions, whoever wins their division or their conference, go to a playoff system and they just play each other.
Yeah, but I was saying if they went to that, what would everybody talk about? Like, there wouldn't be anything to talk about. There would be no more, well, how many SEC schools are going to be in the top 4? Should this school get into there? And what about Marshall? And what about Duke and the polls? And they're ranked higher than this one, but this team beat that team, and this one done this one, and TCU's better than Baylor. Oh, no, they're not. Baylor's better than TCU. Well, blah, 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 all down what we've been doing in all these little shows. All the stuff on TV and like this one right here. If you'd done that, there wouldn't be anything to talk about, really.
Well, I could, kind of. It wouldn't be as controversial, but it would be more intense. It wouldn't be, we can lose 2 or 3 games, still get in the playoff. No, now you need to win out. I mean, if you don't win your games, you're not playing for the conference championship, and you're not going to the playoffs. It's simple as that. Now you have 2 lost teams that are sitting at 8 and down, and still have a potential to move up into the top 4. There's still plenty of room to grow for the 2 lost teams, and you can have a two lost team playing for the national championship. That sounds a little much.
Right. But that's because of the way it is. I mean, it's still like that because Alabama. What happens if Auburn ends up beating Alabama now? Because Auburn's ranked way down there where they're at. Because Alabama and Auburn still have to play. Mississippi State and Ole Miss still have to play.
Yeah.
And then they still have a conference championship. But what this is, that top 4 is still going to get mixed up a whole bunch.
Yeah.
But with the conference championship, there wouldn't be that much. You win your conference, that's it. There is no if you lose this, then you don't get to play. Because there's only 1 slot for 1 SEC team, not 2 slots. So there's still something for Mississippi State to play for. Because they can't afford to lose anymore.
Yeah. And then that would kind of also make it a little bit more difficult. Because you got like the TCU and Baylor, they've only lost 1 game each, and they don't even have a conference championship game. It's just how you end the season.
Right.
So that would be whoever wins that wins it. But also in that situation, now you can have 2 Big 12 teams playing in the playoff. If all works out and Auburn loses or Alabama loses and Mississippi State loses, they're going to jump up. I mean, Ohio State maybe because of their conference championship game, but both teams still have a shot. And have no SEC teams in the playoff system.
Possibly, but I can't see a playoff with 4 without an SEC. There's too much talent and too much good teams there for them not to be represented by at least 1 team or possibly 2.
So so we're saying if Auburn and Mississippi State lose their last game of the regular season, and then more than likely they're going to play each other again in the conference championship, and
well, no, because all those are in the same one.
Oh,
because I'm pretty sure that Alabama. Yeah, I'm almost positive.
So there's a real shot there can't be an SEC team in the conference in the playoff.
There's a shot that there can't, but I don't see the committee doing that. There'll be an SEC team in.
You think so?
Yeah, because what happens if Alabama loses? So Alabama loses to Auburn, they'll only have 2 losses. I still think they'll be in there. And if Mississippi State loses, they probably won't, but I see Alabama staying in there because of how tough they play. There's just a lot. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that the committee looks at. They look at how people losing. That's something that a poll or a computer thing doesn't necessarily look at.
Yeah, I know. Just food for thought, I guess. Now looking at last week's games, like Mike said, him and both Opie were both in a tournament last weekend, so they didn't get to watch it much, if any, college football, and I got to watch pretty much all the games. The Auburn-Georgia game, I was surprised at that. I figured Georgia would run all over, especially with Gurley back. But I didn't expect it to be that bad, and boy, did they ever run all over him. Chubb even had a huge game with what limited carries he got, and he's going to get the bulk of the carries the rest of the season because Gurley got injured within like the last 5 minutes of the game. I understand you want to get him his yards, you want to get him back in the flow of the game, and potentially back in the Heisman race, but you lost your top running back for the season because of that. I mean, Chubb's not a bad guy. He's obviously filled in the shoes.
I think Chubb's had more yards than he did.
Yeah.
Chubb's was like 17 for 144 or something like that.
Yeah, he had a crazy good game.
Yeah, that's pretty damn good.
And the Florida State-Miami game, once again, came down to one play or a couple plays where they got lucky. The one that speaks to me is the defensive lineman dropped back in coverage, and Winston threw it over the middle for a pass. The guy tipped it in the air. The receiver happened to be coming across in like a drag route, I guess, just right behind the line. Caught it and scored a touchdown. Happened to be right place, right time. The guy's a senior, hardly caught any balls ever, but he caught a big one. They scored the touchdown, and they ended up winning the game. And Miami's kicker missed a field goal. And I think he had an extra point blocked, and that's the 4-point swing right there at least. Yep. It's one of those. It could have been, once again, it could have been any way, one way or the other. And then, like I've said, I'm probably gonna put Florida State on upset alert every week, because every week is one of those games for them. They could lose at any given time.
Yeah, it sure seems they forget how to play in the first half, and then all of a sudden find some kind of way to win. But that's something to be said too. They find a way to win, but I still don't feel that, they should even be in that position against a Miami team that's not very good now. I mean, Miami's probably gonna be really good in a couple of years. They're not there now. I didn't get to watch too much of Alabama and Mississippi State. Well, actually, I didn't get to watch any of it at all. I was surprised. I was just kind of checking the score on my phone. I was surprised Alabama pulled away so quickly, so far ahead. But Mississippi State, found a way to try to come back and make it close at the end. I don't know. I think Mississippi State had more yards than Alabama did, but Alabama ended up winning the game.
Yeah, I didn't get to watch hardly any of that one either. I think it was time conflict or maybe scheduling for my area. And then the Wisconsin-Nebraska game, I watched quite a bit of that too. And like I said, I was completely wrong on that. Melvin Gordon absolutely tore it up, and just surprised me. And they ran away with it, never looked back. It was a good game for Wisconsin at the very least.
Something else I wanted to touch on was TCU almost getting beat by a really bad Kansas team. I kind of like TCU. They've looked pretty good all year, but I don't know what happened to them in that game there. I don't know if there's much excuse for that. And then I did watch some of the Arizona-Oregon State. I think that might have been one of the games that we talked about, because Oregon State's they're kind of in between. They got some young players. They're not too bad. They're 5-5, and they've only won 2 games in the Pac-12. But they're a tough team. They're tough to play at home. So that was a pretty interesting game.
And then the Duke Virginia Tech. I was kind of rooting for Duke just because we get fans that watch, obviously. And like I said, I want them to play Florida State in the conference championship and beat the crap out of them. I don't know how it's going to work out now. They kind of let it slip away towards the end. Virginia Tech ends up getting the win. And then Northwestern over Notre Dame. Northwestern beat Notre Dame. That's crazy.
Well, I've been saying in all these episodes that Notre Dame is not as good as we think they are. I think I have. If I haven't, I made that up, and I apologize. Because that makes Florida State look even worse, because one of their big marquee wins was that win over Notre Dame. Well, how good does it look now? But that's just part of the stuff. I mean, you can say that for either way, I guess.
Yeah, I was kind of riding the coattails of Notre Dame for a little bit, especially after that Florida State game, because it was so close. But then almost losing to Navy, losing to Arizona State, and then losing to Northwestern. It was kind of in a downward spiral. And then the other game, I called it, but I wanted to call it a couple of weeks later. The Arkansas LSU. I said this year they were getting their first SEC win, and they shut out LSU, a ranked LSU team. They shut them out, 17-0. And I was going to call Arkansas over Missouri. That was going to be my game.
Well, I tell you, Arkansas has looked pretty good in losses to other teams. We'll see how good they do. They have they play Ole Miss this week at home, I believe. So they got Ole Miss coming to town. So we'll see. We'll see how good they're going to do against Ole Miss. It'll be interesting. It'll be a fun game to watch. Which brings us right into this week's picks. Number 8, Ole Miss at Arkansas. Ole Miss is a 4-point favorite. Chef, what you got? You gonna ride the coattails? Come on.
I might actually do it with Arkansas, because Ole Miss struggled against LSU, and they were, granted, LSU's defense is probably significantly better than Arkansas's, but LSU also just got shut out to Arkansas. So that's saying something for their team, and especially since they're coming off their first SEC win. They're pumped up, ready to go. I'd like to take Ole Miss, but they had like a bye week, essentially, against their last team, and now they're playing against an Arkansas team that's looking decent, and beat the team that beat them. One of the teams to beat them. So I'm actually going to go Arkansas.
I'm going to go ahead and go Ole Miss. I think they got something to prove. They're probably a little pissed off that they, got the 2 losses that they do, even though that they lost the receiver, 2 weeks prior, 3 weeks prior. I'm still going to take Ole Miss because I think they can pull it out. I think they'll do all right, come in there, got something to prove, and play a solid game. Next game, number 15, Arizona at number 17, Utah. Utah's 4-point favorite. I'll go ahead and go first on this one. I'm going to pick Utah. They're playing at home. They play great at home. Got a great pass rush. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
I'm going to go Utah as well. I want to take Arizona, but they've been struggling here recently. And Utah's been a surprise all year. And I'm actually looking forward to their game. I like their kicker better than Arizona's.
Yeah. Last game that we're going to cover, number 19, USC at number 9, UCLA. UCLA 3-point favorite. I'll go ahead and go first on this one, too. I'm going to go ahead and pick UCLA just because they're at home. It's going to be a rivalry game. I think I think Brett Hundley come out, get some work done, hopefully. I'm
going to go opposite. I'm going to take USC. They've had a couple of losses to teams maybe not should have, especially the Boston College game. But they've had a lot of close games and a lot of close games that shouldn't have been. And I think this week they got something to prove because I guess last year is what it was, where they looked bad. So I'm actually gonna take USC over UCLA this week. I think they got it. UCLA's had way too many. Was that 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks in a row where they've had closer games than they probably should have. Last time they played was a 44-30, so that's not too bad. But they gave up 30 points to a Washington team.
Well, they go 37 to a Colorado team that's not very good either.
Yeah,
the one in double overtime.
And then Cal, same thing there.
Yeah, pretty much a coin flip on this game, I think. While we're talking about games, go back. I want to see what the line is on the Florida State game, just for the heck of it.
Oh, Florida State actually got a line of -19.
Right. Yep. Florida State's a 19-point favorite over Boston College, which I did watch the last, 7 minutes of the game against Miami. It wasn't even. It might as well have been a home game for them. They played in Miami. And you could still hear the chant, thing, whenever they were playing. And, it was loud for the Miami offense. It might as well have been a home game for Florida State, and it was still that close. Just something that I wanted to throw out there as a point. How do you feel about the 4 teams they have this week?
I'm going to be honest. I'm not happy Alabama leapfrogged from 5-1. Granted, their wins have been a lot better than Oregon's wins. I don't know if I would have put them at 1. I might have put them at 3 or maybe 2, but I don't think they deserve to jump to number 1. What was it? TCU dropped a little bit. Mississippi State, granted that was their first loss, so I could see them being number 4. I'm okay with that. TCU dropped out, but other than that, Alabama jumping that high, I'm not a big fan of that. I like the Alabama and Oregon should swap, I think. Florida State, Missouri, Mississippi State's fine. TCU, Ohio State, Baylor, I'm happy with that.
Yeah. The deal that I have, I agree that they shouldn't have jumped from 1 to 4. But I don't think Oregon should be ahead of Alabama. I think Alabama's had a tougher schedule. Alabama's really coming on. And that's hard for me to say because I really don't. I don't like the Crimson Tide. I really don't. But I try to stay unbiased when I'm doing this. And I like Oregon. I liked them when Chip Kelly was over there. Their offense was fun to watch. He's the first person that really brought the up-tempo spread offense type looks to, out there to the west. It was pretty cool. I don't like Florida State over Mississippi State. So swap those two. I think Florida State should be on the brink like number 4, just because they've been on the brink of losing 5 games this year. I don't think they're that stout. I think if Miami would have not taken their foot off the accelerator, because I was listening to somebody else talk. I can't remember who it was. One of the other, Herb Street or whoever it was. One of those shows like that, and they talked about Miami come out and they were attacking and doing well. Then all of a sudden they kind of were playing not to lose instead of playing to win, and I think they kind of let Florida State come back. So. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. TCU, Ohio State jumped up after they beat after they beat Michigan State. I think you can flip-flop TCU and Baylor. I think they're one and the same, really. I don't know that Baylor or TCU is necessarily better than Ole Miss, but I do agree that Ole Miss is probably the best two-loss team. Yeah, I think it's safe to say that they're probably the best two-loss team. And if they win out and some other stuff goes right, they have a chance of being 4th or 5th. Florida State messes up and they lose. If Mississippi State loses and Alabama loses, then there's a possibility that Ole Miss could climb their way back into contention to playing. But, I don't have other than those things I said, I really don't have too much of a problem with it.
I'm interested to see how far TCU falls, because they're pretty much done with the bulk of their schedule. Like, they don't really have anybody left, while Baylor has the bulk of their schedule to go.
Who does Baylor have left?
Or they had. They still got K-State at the end, but Oklahoma State, who started off the season great. They
did, yeah. They kind of tapered off a little bit.
And Texas Tech, who's been garbage all season. But K-State's going to be interesting for them, unless they pull a TCU and just absolutely beat the crap out of them. But they have a chance to still move up some more, because they beat Oklahoma pretty handily. And TCU's got a Texas team this week, or is it next week? Next week. Which I'm looking forward to that. Texas has, 3 games in a row they've won? They're sitting, I think, 3rd.
I guess. That's your team. I haven't been following them.
Yeah, they're sitting up pretty high for a team that was just horrible to start the season. They're sitting 4th. They're over an Oklahoma team and a West Virginia team and Oklahoma State team who are all ranked, or at one point were ranked. And they weren't expected to win anything, let alone be bowl eligible. So I think Baylor's got the chance to jump TCU in the ranking. The only advantage TCU lost to Baylor. So as long as Baylor wins out, they're going to claim the conference. I think Baylor will leapfrog TCU. They'll probably swap more than likely in the rankings. And Baylor, as long as they win, has got the only shot for the Big 12 for the playoff.
But I think that's all we're going to cover. Kind of a shallow, short week. Got a bunch of them teams playing a bunch of silly teams that they shouldn't be playing. But I appreciate everybody watching, and we'll see you next time.
Later, guys.